1-point perspective. In the previous video, we saw how things in perspective foreshorten into a point in the horizon line, where they become so small that they seem to vanish. We call this point the vanishing point. We also saw how the box had 9 visible lines and 3 hidden ones. These 12 lines can be arranged in 3 pairs of parallel lines: width lines, height lines, and length lines. One vanishing point. If we put a cube right in front of us, we will notice that we can only see 2 of its sides: the front face and the top face if our eye level is above the cube, or the front and the bottom faces if our eye level is below the cube. If the cube is open, like the walls of a room, we will be able to see the side faces as well, and we'll notice that they too foreshorten to the same vanishing point as all the other sides. We can also notice that the width and height lines always remain parallel to each other, and consequently unchanged, while the length lines foreshorten to the vanishing point in the back, resting on the horizon line. This is what we know as 1-point perspective. 1-point perspective happens when the objects we are about to draw are facing us, and their vanishing point is located right behind them on the horizon line. It is important to remember that in 1-point perspective only the length foreshortens. The height and the width always remain parallel. Drawing boxes in 1-point perspective. We are going to see some practical examples of how to draw boxes in 1-point perspective. We will start by creating a 1-point perspective setup in our paper. We must first define the eye level of our scene. Next, we will add a single vanishing point somewhere around the middle of the line. Once we have it, we can begin by drawing a box. As we just learned, the height and width lines do not foreshorten. Therefore, we can safely draw the front face of the box as we want it to be. Knowing that the length does foreshorten, we will simply draw a line from each corner of the front face and we will extend them to the vanishing point. Somewhere along this length will be the back face of the box. To draw it, we will intersect the foreshortened lines shown in the video. It is not necessary to draw the hidden lines of the box every time, since they can make the drawing confusing and full of lines. We will draw the hidden lines only when we need to have a better understanding of the size and position of the box. We can repeat this process to draw any number of boxes with any shape and in any position, as long as they keep facing us. There are several ways to measure the exact amount of foreshortening for our drawn objects, but they require to have a little more knowledge on perspective drawing, so we will study them further in the course. For now, we will try to eyeball the length, remembering that the furthest away the box is, the shorter and smaller it will look. Notice how when drawn above the eye level we can see the bottom face of the box, as if it was floating over our heads, and when drawn under the eye level we see the top faces, as if they were in the floor at our feet. When drawn at the same height as our eye level, the box will appear to be right in front of us, and we will be able to see only the front face, that will be covering the rest of the box as it foreshortens away to the vanishing point. And that's it! 1-point perspective is that easy. The most important thing to remember when drawing 1-point perspective is that the objects we draw must be positioned facing the viewer, and the vanishing point must be right behind them within a certain threshold. If the vanishing point was to displace to the right or to the left, we would get a wrong perspective. Do you see the difference? This box looks distorted, while this one appears to be correct. Avoiding distortion in 1-point perspective. To better illustrate these concepts, we are going to be using the perspective ruler of Manga Studio Clip Studio Paint. As you can see, this ruler comes by default with an eye level and a vanishing point that we can adjust. From this vanishing point, we have 2 guides that radiate with an angle of 90 degrees. This angle is very important because it indicates the threshold in which the drawing will keep correct proportions. The best way to see this is to activate the floor grid. This grid is composed of perfect squares. If we look closely to the size of the squares, we can see that the squares within this range remain fairly proportionate, while the squares outside the guides quickly start to distort as we move towards the sides. As we can see here, the distortion also starts to happen the further away from the vanishing point we are. To avoid distortion in our drawing, we must try to keep the drawing within these lines, as much as possible. The best way to do this is by drawing a safe zone around the most proportionate parts of our grid and make our drawings there. In any case, one-point perspective is the most prone to distortion, so don't worry too much about defining your safe zones. Just try to keep the important parts of the drawing as close as the vanishing point as possible, and you will do great. Coming up next. In the next video, we will see how by following the same principle, we can draw more complicated boxy shapes, such as letters. See you then! Stay tuned for our next tutorials.